And welcome to Point of View on this beautiful Christmas week. We are going to be finishing up, God willing, our series on the myths about Christmas today. And this is the special extended half an hour of Point of View that you get every Tuesday night. I'm Josh Barnes, of course, and this is Justin Barnes. And we deal with any issue, right? Anything that's in the news, anything that people are talking about, anything that's like the popular thing to talk about. But we do it from a biblical point of view. So if you like this kind of content and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. If you don't subscribe to us already on YouTube, go find us on YouTube. And you can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/POV with JB. And we really appreciate that and want to bring you all this kind of content. We do a lot of political stuff on here because, of course, that's what people talk about a lot. But for the last 3 weeks, and this is our fourth week, I think, right? Yeah, this is number 4. We have been talking about Christmas and how so many people just assume that Christmas, like the traditions and the things that we celebrate at Christmas are, they're based on pagan worship. And we just adopted them to the worship of Christ. And some people go even further, that the worship of Christ is itself a copy of pagan worship. So for the last 3 weeks, we've dealt with a bunch of pagan gods, Dionysus, the Greek god. We've talked about Persian god. We've talked about the Egyptian god Horus. We've talked about all sorts of different gods and Roman celebrations that were taking place around this time when Jesus was born and when people first started celebrating the birth of Jesus. And we talked about how those are not where we got our celebration for the birth of Jesus, that we've proved that. We've gone through documentation for all that. But there's 2 other things that people like to bring up. We were going to deal a little bit with Christmas caroling today, but I don't think we have to because we kind of dealt with that when we were talking about the Roman celebration of Sol Invictus, or was it Saturnalia? Which one of those was we dealt with Christmas caroling there, where they would carol, but they would carol in the nude and they would carol drunken, and that was of course not the type of singing that we do. We go Christmas caroling. At least I hope that's not how you've celebrated Christmas. If so, I would say repent, get right with God, and put some clothes on. But let's talk about this Christmas trees. Now, this if you have a Jehovah's Witness background at all, or you've met Jehovah's Witness or anything like that, this is one of the first things they'll say. When you put a Christmas tree in your house, you are participating in idolatry, according to Jehovah's Witness and others. And so we're going to talk about that today. And then we're going to talk about Santa Claus, because that's another big one that a lot of people say, wow, he's Satan Claus. You celebrate, so we're going to actually deal with this honestly and say, is there pagan roots to these things? And let's actually look at factual things, not like, oh, I'm offended, I like Santa Claus, or I'm offended, I don't like Santa, whatever. Let's deal with it honestly. And of course, the main thing that we have to keep in mind is no matter what we find about these practices, is that when you're participating in them, it doesn't mean you're participating in idolatry unless you literally are worshiping something other than God and other than Jesus Christ. And of course, if that's the case, you are participating in idolatry, no matter whether you are doing things that used to be pagan or not. So let's talk about Christmas trees. Here's the argument against the Christmas tree, okay? And I'll start with this passage in Jeremiah chapter 10. This is a prophecy that was given to the prophet Jeremiah. He says in verse 1, "Hear ye the word of the Lord, which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them, for the customs of the people are vain. One cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they can not do evil, neither also is it in them to do good." And so he's basically saying that idolaters would take trees, put silver and gold on them, And this is what we do at Christmas. And so therefore, some have drawn the conclusion that we are idolaters if we have a Christmas tree at Christmas time. There's also the other argument for it is that the Roman cult of Asherah, actually put trees in their home and decorated them as part of this cultic worship of Asherah. Now, Justin, what kind of documentation do we have on this? Let's start with Jeremiah 10. Is Jeremiah 10 a good reason for us to say no Christmas trees on Christmas?
All right. Well, so Jeremiah 10. Let me try to be as crystal clear as I can be in this one. If you use Jeremiah 10 in order to prove Christmas trees are bad, you should not be someone who is trying to teach anyone the Bible. Because this is what we call terrible hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the method of studying the Bible. And this is just absolutely mangling a text. Let me put you back into the context that Jeremiah is dealing with. He's a prophet to people who are going to be overtaken. We're going to get into the book of Lamentations when Jerusalem is destroyed and all that sort of stuff. And it's because of their idolatry that is the reason why they're going to be taken into captivity. So when Jeremiah talks in his context, not in our context, he says this: "Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen," which would be idolatry, "and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of people," and this is where people make their case. "One cuts a tree out of the forest, works of the hands of the workmen, and with the axe." Well, hang on a second. What is the work of the workman on a Christmas tree? Because we already have the cutting of the tree. Who's working the tree after that? I thought it was cut the tree, put it in your house. Maybe I'm doing Christmas trees wrong.
You have to trim it down to get it to fit in the house.
I don't know, but already we have a red flag, because hang on a second. This isn't a Christmas tree. We don't work the tree. We cut it down, shove it in the house, and put a bunch of stuff on it. But let's keep going. Let's see if we can confirm this theory that this isn't Christmas trees. With the work of the hands, the workmen. So we already did that. That's a little weird, but maybe this is still Christmas trees. They deck it with silver and gold. See those silver and gold balls? Those things are annoying anyway. They break whenever you even blow on them. So I'll grant you, I hate those. But then they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. I've never done that. Maybe they do that in other places with Christmas trees. Next verse. "They're upright as the palm tree, but speak not." Does anyone expect their Christmas tree to talk? Like,
I've been waiting. I just won't speak.
Like, I don't know. Maybe there's some customs where people like have mushrooms or a lot of alcohol or something, and their Christmas trees talk. But mine is never even. It's never even come to my mind to think this Christmas tree might start talking. Why would you think this is a Christmas tree? Let's see. What else would fit? Maybe a god that you have cut from a tree, shaped with an axe, and as the hand of a workman, put a mouth on him, but he can't talk. But maybe it's still a Christmas tree. Let's keep going. "They must needs be born, because they cannot go." I don't know why we would expect them to move unless they have legs on them. "Be not afraid of them." Wait, what? Be not Is anyone terrified of their Christmas tree? And the cherry on top, "For as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord." If you don't have in mind the context of an idol, a false god, that sentence makes no sense. Yeah, a Christmas tree is not like the Almighty God. Well, no, duh. If you don't, this is why I say, if you use this text to try to make an argument about Christmas trees, you should not try to handle the text. Yeah. This is forcing an interpretation where it does not belong. The text is abundantly clear. This is talking about idols, going out, cutting down a tree, shaping it into an idol, giving it a mouth, but that can't speak, giving it legs that can't walk, and making it a god with gold and silver all over it, but a god that is nothing compared to Almighty God. That is clearly what the text is saying.
Yeah. Well, and I want to read that again because you read through it with the idea that it could be Christmas trees, and all these red flags were coming up that didn't make sense. But now read through it again with the idea that it's an actual idol that they're fashioning. The customs of the people are vain. This is verse 3. One cutteth a tree out of the forest, and the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. So they cut a tree, they take the wood, and they work and form it into the shape of an idol. They deck it with silver and gold, which they did with idols. They fasten it with nails and hammer, probably either into their home, into a temple, or onto a stand that they could then set it up on. But it doesn't move. It's upright like a tree, but it doesn't speak. It's shaped like some sort of creature, but it can't speak. It has to be carried and taken around because it can't walk on its own. He's pointing out that these idols can't do anything. There's nothing to be afraid of. They can't do anything. They can't even speak. It has nothing to do with Christmas trees. Plus, I want to point out that Jeremiah was written way before anyone ever used a Christmas tree to celebrate Christmas. Like, he's not writing about Christmas trees.
Christmas wasn't a thing in Jeremiah's time.
Yeah. I mean, just so people know, Jeremiah, I mean, there's some people who are watching this who are super biblically literate and others who are less. That's fine. Jeremiah is the Old Testament. This is hundreds of years before Jesus was born. And then once Jesus was born, you probably have maybe somewhere between 50 years or so before you actually see evidence, 50 to 100 years before. Well, we start seeing evidence of them celebrating the birth of Christ somewhere in the early 3rd century, which would be somewhere 100 or so, a couple hundred years after Jesus is born. So what we're saying is that, and even then, they're not using Christmas trees to celebrate the birth of Christ. So there's no way Jeremiah was talking about the practice of Christmas trees when he prophesied about these trees decked with silver and gold.
Yeah. I mean, again, I want, again, to be abundantly clear, there is zero merit to the claim that this is Christmas trees. Zero. If you think this is an argument against Christmas trees, you are standing on your own authority, not the Bible's. This has nothing to do with what you're trying to make it say it says. It's not what it's saying.
Okay, so, but let's talk about the Roman cult of Asherah, because the cult of Asherah did predate the birth of Christ, and there is a claim that is made that they used decorated trees in their homes to celebrate Asherah. Is this where we get the Christmas tree from, Justin?
No. A couple reasons why. Number one, we don't have a source that tells us that this is what the cult of Asherah did. Now, if you want to know, you can look in the Old Testament. There is talk of this, I believe it was a goddess, Asherah. A lot of people say Asherah.
Oh, my bad.
Well, I've heard it pronounced most recently as Asherah too. So Asherah, same thing. But you'll see that commonly it's equated with like the groves, these high places and groves and places where Asherah is worshipped. This deity would be a very closely linked with trees and stuff like that. So I think that's where people make the leap that then people would cut down trees and put them in their home. Except for, I don't know of a source for that claim. I don't know of where they would get that sort of idea from. I've heard of them doing something with sticks sometimes. But as far as like cutting down, dragging a tree into their house and decorating it, it isn't there. But secondly, Christians, for as far as I can tell, over 1,000 years, also didn't use Christmas trees. So if the claim is that it comes from the cult of Asherah or Asherah, then you would have to say somewhere around Martin Luther, people went, you know what, that cult of Asherah, like thousands of years ago, they did something with trees, and I think we ought to adopt that, even though the cult is long gone by now. We want to adopt this random pagan practice for who knows why, and that's what we're going to start doing now.
Right.
It's a completely anachronistic way. It's like, we do this right now. Somebody did that. We're going to just claim somebody did that a couple thousand years ago. Therefore, that's where we got it from.
Right. Makes no sense.
It's illogical.
So, but here's where I want you to fact check me on this, because this is what I've found in my research, and maybe you can confirm this. So I think the first time we actually see Christmas trees showing up in history, where we have documented proof that this practice began, was actually in Germany. And there's evidence that suggests that it was Martin Luther is said to have, there's a story where he's said to have been walking through the trees, through the woods, and he looked up and saw the sky and saw the stars shining through the trees. And to him, he said that he thought about how Christ came from heaven to the earth, and it just reminded him of the beauty of Jesus coming to earth as a child. So because of the stars through the trees, he said, I'm going to just cut one down and bring this beauty of the stars shining through the trees into my house. So he actually brought it into his house and decorated it as a reminder of this beautiful thing. And it really didn't catch on until the British royal family adopted the practice and decided to put a tree in their house, in the palace, and that sort of, it spread like wildfire after that, right? People just like, oh wow, this is so cool. You know, the British royal family has a tree, and now everyone wants a Christmas tree, and that's sort of where it started. Is that all? Is that pretty true?
I think that's probably the best place you could point to. Now, whether or not that tale of Luther is true is a sort of different issue, because there's a possibility this is just legend. But the fact is that people point to this legend as to why it was a sort of German tradition. Whether or not Luther actually did this is sort of almost irrelevant, because that's where they're at least pointing to as to why we do this. But yeah, there's a legend that Luther's walking through, sees the star, and thinks about all that stuff. Then he cuts the tree, takes it home, puts lights on it, and uses it sort of as an object lesson for his kids to teach them about Jesus coming and all that sort of stuff. So yes, and this would explain, by the way, why Christmas trees were a German tradition until about the 1800s, because that's where you do have the British royal family setting them up and making a big sort of to-do out of it. And then it does sort of spread like wildfire to now. Christmas trees are one of the most iconic decorations for any holiday ever. I mean, you've got the tree in New York, what is it, the Rockefeller? Is that the right one? Yeah. You got the Rockefeller tree. I mean, Christmas trees are everywhere now. That's the best source that you can trace it back to. There's a couple other places people like to trace it, and again, one of them would be the cult of Ashera, but it's just not very good evidence. This one makes the most sense, again, being it comes from a German influence into the world. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we can cross that off our list. You having a Christmas tree in your house does not make you participating in pagan practices. We don't know that pagans ever brought trees into their house. Jeremiah 10 is not speaking about Christmas trees as idols, as saying that idols are idols and they aren't anything like Christmas trees. And we actually have evidence that points, at least we know for sure that the Christmas trees originated as a celebration of Christmas in Germany, and we think that evidence points us to Martin Luther as the first one to start the practice of Christmas trees. So this is a uniquely Christian, uniquely Christmas practice, and don't feel bad about participating in it. Don't feel like that makes your celebration pagan. Let's talk about the other one though, because this one, a lot of people say that when you celebrate Santa Claus, or you believe in Santa Claus, that or you teach your kids to believe in Santa Claus, that you're teaching them to think about someone other than Christ at Christmas, and that Santa Claus is taking Christ's place, which reminds me of an episode of The Office. Basically, the argument is made that Santa Claus detracts from the real meaning and message of Christmas, and that we shouldn't be emphasizing Santa Claus at Christmas time. But there's also others who'd say, no, Santa Claus actually comes from a mythical pagan sort of a figure. Now, we know that Santa Claus, the original name for Santa Claus was Saint Nicholas, right? Who was the Bishop of Myra in the 300s AD. How did he get from just a regular old bishop in the 300s AD all the way to Santa Claus, who's going around the world and delivering presents? And is that sort of a pagan mythical thing, or is it perfectly harmless?
Right. So you have quite a bit actually to unpack on this one. So you have, first of all, there's different names for Santa Claus, and most people don't even know that they have different origin points, but you have Saint Nicholas, jolly old Saint Nick. Then you have Santa Claus. Then you have Kris Kringle. All of these come from different places.
Mm-hmm.
But
and
if
Father
you go back
Christmas.
if you go back to the beginning, you have excuse me, Saint Nicholas. He was the Bishop of Myra. How he became so popular depends on how you read the testimony of what exactly he did. There is a lot of legend about Saint Nicholas, as to, stories of Jesus and Mary standing next to him, confirming him to the rest of the people of Council of Nicaea, like, okay, he's a good guy. You should like him. Do I believe that? No. Heck no, I do not. So
he's said to have inherited a large sum of money and gave it all away.
Well, again, that's, if it's true, it could be. Here's the thing. Something must have happened, because Saint Nick was definitely a big figure. There was a lot of talk about him, but it's not known what of it is true and what isn't. Now, supposedly at the Council of Nicaea, he punched a heretic, Arius, right in the mouth. And that's why he went to the council, just because he wanted to punch the guy. And boy, howdy do. Are there pages that love church history that they're selling all sorts of stuff about St. Nicholas this time of year punching Arius? Did that actually happen? I don't know. Again, there's also legend about Jesus and Mary at that same council with St. Nicholas. So I don't know how much of it I believe, but there's a lot of story about the St. Nicholas.
Is it fair to say then that he became sort of like a Chuck Norris, right? Where everyone is like, only where Chuck Norris is like super. We talk about him like when Chuck Norris does push-ups, the earth moves underneath him. He doesn't move. That sort of thing.
That is the worst way of telling that Chuck Norris joke I have ever heard. It's Chuck Norris when he does push-ups. He doesn't push himself up. He pushes the world down. Okay. How could you mess up the easiest Chuck Norris joke out there?
I'm not good with jokes.
He sleeps with a pillow under his gun. That sort of thing. These are the easiest jokes in the world.
No, but is that a good way to relate to what happened with St. Nicholas, where he was a real guy, he did some great things, just like Chuck Norris is a real guy, did some, has some cool moves and is strong and all that, but he became sort of like this figure that everyone just sort of made up fanciful stories about because of some good things that he did do.
I mean, in some ways, yes. What you have to understand about early church history is that there were big name saints, so to speak, and there's a lot of legend that sort of comes up around them. So, for example, you have Polycarp is one of the bishops who knew John the Apostle, all that sort of stuff. When he's martyred, there's a lot of legend about his martyrdom. One of them being that, like, they go to I forget exactly what it is, but I think they were going to burn him at the stake or something, and they had cut him, and the blood from his cut puts out the fire. Like, there's so much blood that it just like pours out of him and puts out the fire, so they had to relight it, all that stuff. A lot of legend that when these big Christian names sort of became popular, a lot of legend naturally just comes up around them. So it's not like it was just St. Nicholas where this happens. This happened to a lot of saints, but it did happen to St. Nicholas. So weeding out the fact from the fiction is a little bit difficult. But whatever you want to say, St. Nicholas was a real historical figure. And there's a lot of legend of him giving out a lot of money to help like orphans and a lot of stuff like that. So you
the
get
legend suggests that at least there's some things that this was based on it, that where
right,
there are some good things that he
popular.
must have done.
Yeah, there was a reason he became popular. It wasn't just because they said, "Oh, hey, let's make a legend out of that guy." He was a well-known person, big figure, and then legend starts coming around him too. So
Okay, so here's where I think the story gets to be more of a more weird, because I think there was this figure in, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's a figure in Britain that was considered to be like Father Christmas, and that sort of the myth of Father Christmas got merged somehow with Saint Nicholas, and it became Santa Claus, and that's where you have this sort of a fanciful magical thing that becomes that Saint Nicholas becomes. Is that a fair way to say that?
As far as the legend, yes, there's actually there's German, there's Dutch, there's English, there's lots of different influences that sort of take this Santa Claus figure and kind of shape him into what he has become today. The name Santa Claus actually, I believe, if I'm correct, comes from the Dutch, which would be Sinterklaas, which is Saint Nick in Dutch, Saint Nicholas in Dutch, Sinterklaas. But that becomes Santa Claus is what they end up calling him. So the name comes from the Dutch, but then you've got legends about who Saint Nick is comes from a lot of different areas. I mean, you have one about him being an elf. I forget exactly where it comes from, but there's a legend about him actually being an elf, not having
was an elf, yeah.
But he was himself an elf, a jolly old elf.
I think if you read the what was the story, the poem Up on a Housetop, no, that's a song. No, if you read that Christmas poem, the not a creature was stirring, 'twas the night before Christmas.
Night before Christmas, yeah.
He actually is called a jolly old elf, which I think was the original sort of myth about
right.
him.
And then around there, that might be where you get the idea that he has elves working for him.
Right.
So, but yeah, but then you actually, this is funny because you brought up at the beginning of this discussion the whole idea of people pushing back against Santa because it takes away from Jesus. Well, our good friend Martin Luther had the same mindset on this because he didn't like that Santa was taking so much attention during the Christmas season. He thought it was taking away from the actual point of Christmas, which would be Christ and his birth. So he said that Christmas should be about the Christkindl, which means Christ child. But you might know where this is going because Santa Claus ends up becoming Kris Kringle. So basically, Santa earned himself another name by taking the name of the thing that was supposed to take away from his attention and put it back on Jesus. So Luther's like, let's make Christkindl the point. And Santa's like, yeah, I'll take that. Kris Kringle. Sure. And now no one knows about Christkindl, but they know about Kris Kringle. So that's where you get that name too.
So but is that a good reason to say, wow, he actually, the name Kris Kringle is actually a German word that means the Christ child, and it's now being applied to the wrong person? Like, isn't that a good reason to say that Santa Claus is like, oh man, that's sketchy. Like you're taking, the glory of this celebration away from Jesus.
Here's the thing. Different people fall in different places on the discussion of Santa Claus. And I think that it partly depends on what Santa you're referring to. If you're referring to the St. Nicholas of Myra, I think your children are going to have a much harder time being excited about Santa. But if you want to tell us some stories about that, I get it. But I have a hard time making a good case for Christians celebrating Santa. At least this iteration of Santa. Not in that it's sin or that it's wrong or something like that, but if we're saying the point of the season is Christ, then yes, Santa does take away from it. And also, if you're telling them Santa is a guy that comes and brings gifts, I don't know how you get away from that being lying. Like I don't see how this isn't in that vein. And I know this is sort of anecdotal, but I remember hearing of a family where they finally told their kids Santa isn't real, and so they looked at them and said, "Oh, what does that mean? Jesus isn't real?" So what you're doing is you're basically undermining your ability to tell them about Christ, because you say, "Hey, here's Jesus. Here's all these things about Jesus, and here's Santa, and here's all these things about Santa." Well, once the Santa pillar falls, then you can see the Jesus pillar is also on shaky ground in their mind. So I don't know if it's wise to do the whole Santa thing, but that's just my take. I
So
don't know if I could be dogmatic.
it seems to me that it's sort of like, if you have turkey become sort of your main thought about Thanksgiving, right? And all your, it's all about turkey, right? It becomes, oh wait, you're missing the point, because the point, it's fine to have turkey as a way to celebrate your thankfulness to God, but like you're missing the point. It's all about God and your thankfulness to Him, and it should be the same thing for Easter, right? It's fine if you want to go out and collect eggs that are supposedly from the Easter bunny, but it's just should be a way that you celebrate the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, and rather than it being about that, right? And I think when we're talking about Santa Claus, when it becomes about Santa Claus, and I think this is dangerous for children, because I think if parents aren't careful, they can give their children the idea that everything about Christmas revolves around Christmas gifts, and the gifts come from Santa Claus. So really Christmas revolves around Santa Claus. Yeah. And I think that there's a way to do it well that doesn't take the emphasis away from Jesus. But I think if it's part of your celebration of the birth of Jesus, it's perfectly fine. But I think when it starts to actually take away from that celebration and become about the individual traditions instead of about the Jesus who the tradition should be for, then yeah, I think you're right. I think you're missing the point, and you're stealing really from yourself and from your children the real celebration that Christmas is.
Yeah, and here's the thing is as I'm thinking it through, I guess if Santa to your kids is like Luke Skywalker, like he's just another one of those stories off in a fairy tale land that they can enjoy. They can watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. They can watch The Year Without a Santa Claus. They can watch all the Santa movies, understanding that this is just a story that's fun and that sort of thing. Perfectly fine. But again, and again, I'm not going to argue that this holiday inherently has to be about the birth of Christ, because this is one we came up with. This isn't a biblically mandated holiday. But if you're going to say, I am celebrating the birth of Christ, then you better celebrate the birth of Christ, not Santa. And I wouldn't want to have kids be in the world where Santa is another Luke Skywalker or another, Paw Patrol or something like that, where you have just this little kid show thing they can enjoy. That's one thing. But then trying to claim to them that this is the truth, this is a claim about reality, I think that's going a bit far.
Yeah, and
I think things there.
Yeah, so again, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that we are objective. We've gone through this whole list of things that absolutely are not pagan at all, like Christmas trees, Christmas caroling, the date for Christmas, all of this stuff that we do at Christmas time that we say this is not pagan, this is legit, like we do this for good reasons. But we're ending on this one to show you that we're not just like accepting everything. We do understand there are some obviously elves and other magical, fanciful, mythical things that have worked their way into the story of this bishop, and that we now call Santa Claus, that does have some pagan origin. If you want to track back where elves and the belief and all those types of things come from, it's like it's a fanciful story, it's a magical story, and it can detract actually from the holiday. So we're trying to be objective here. We're not telling you how you should celebrate Christmas. We're also just trying to weigh these things out fairly, and there is some reason to say, if there is any tradition around Christmas time that has some kind of roots in mythical pagan things, it would probably be the way that we, some of the stories of Santa Claus that we have in Christmas tradition today.
Yeah, so I would be with Martin Luther in a sense, saying, look, if you're going to say that Christmas is about the birth of Christ, the sending of the second person of the Trinity into human flesh, so that he could be our representative as he goes and substitutes for us on the cross, bearing our penalty. If you're saying that's the point of Christmas, then what you do in celebration will reflect that in some sense. So if it is all about presents and all about Santa and all about reindeer and all about this, that, and the other, but not about Jesus, then you're not telling the truth about what you're celebrating. I'm not saying, again, fantasy stuff is lots of fun, especially for kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with having this cool story about some jolly guy who gives people gifts. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you are attempting to celebrate Christ, the jolly guy is working against you in this from the best I can see, the way people emphasize the importance of Santa Claus.
Certainly in some cases that's the case,
right?
And we must guard against that.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would say.
Yeah. And we're actually overtime, but we wanted to wrap it all up, get you all that. And I think that we've given you some definitive stuff. Put in the comments what you think, right? You think we're off on this. I know a lot of people who are just convinced, no. Christmas is a pagan holiday that we've just sort of adopted for Christianity. And I think we've laid out a good case to show you that there's no evidence for that. Actually, the evidence points the other direction. If you are unconvinced, let us know about it. We'll be happy to have more conversation on it, and we'll read your comments on the show as well. And we'll see you next week for the special extended hour of Point of View every Tuesdays at 8:00 p.m. And don't miss it. We'll see you next week.